Hello and welcome to In the Field, a live stream series from Fujifilm South Africa. My name is Paul Choy and I'm a Fujifilm ex-photographer. And as you know, every week we have been going around the world to meet a different photographer and take a behind the scenes look at their photography and their craft. And this week, I am delighted for the final episode of this series to be going full circle, coming home to South Africa, where I'm joined by documentary photographer and fellow ex-photographer, Andile Bhala. Andile, welcome.
Yeah, how's it, man?
Very good, and thank you so much for joining us for this last of the series of In the Field. We've been having some fascinating conversations with different photographers, and I'm really excited to be chatting to you and find out a little bit about your photography. But just before we get there, for those of you who are watching us live, don't forget to share your comments and especially your questions, and I will put them to Andile. And any of you who are joining us later, watching later, you're very welcome. I hope you enjoy our discussion. So, Andile, welcome. Shall we start at the beginning? I've been admiring your photography for a long time, and so I'm really excited to be able to ask you some questions behind it. But first of all, I'm interested in what brought you to photography in the first place. What made you pick up a camera and begin your journey with photography?
Thank you for having me. Photography happened in my life. I played soccer my whole life. I'm a documentary filmmaker at heart. So I started photography because I was trying to find a voice, and I was trying to understand how to create work from where I'm from. So basically photography happened, and I'm still doing it though.
And you say from where you're from, where is that?
I'm a South African-based documentary photographer, born in Soweto, born, Orlando West. That's where I started doing my photography.
And in particular, Fujifilm, because you recently joined the ex-photographer team, a great recognition of your wonderful work. I'm interested, what first brought you to the Fujifilm system in particular?
It's one of those crazy, it happened luck, if I can say it. I entered one of the competition that were hosted by Anthony Bosman, and they were looking for a Josie cityscape. And it happened that I took an image of a Josie cityscape when I was moving around the Joburg CBD. And last day of the competition, I entered one of my images, and luckily I was a finalist, and luckily I won an XT10, and that's where I started using the Fuji system.
So your entry into Fujifilm and using Fujifilm in your work was from entering a photography competition and winning it?
Yeah, I entered the competition, then luckily I won it, and what I liked by that time with the XT10 that I was using, I cycle a lot, and I get to walk around quiet and busy streets, and I realized that the Fuji XT10 was a bit small, and it was easy for me to move around with it.
You know, you come across, and I know you are a very humble person. So when you say luckily you won it, I think you're understating your contribution there a little bit. Luck, I think talent probably played a greater part in winning that, but I think it's a wonderful example of how some things are just meant to happen. And I feel like, looking at your work especially, I feel like when you mentioned that you're using it to find a voice, I feel like that's what was meant to happen. So so you winning that competition, I'm not sure was luck. I think that's what's meant to happen because that brings you into the world of the, or rather brings the people who view your photographs into your world, and I think that's a very special thing. So you mentioned the XT10, which a wonderful camera. Obviously, now it's had a few iterations now, but a wonderful camera. And something I really enjoy about those cameras is, as you mentioned, the lightweight nature of them. They're not intrusive. But what are you using today? That was a little while ago. What are you using today?
I have this crazy love for XT2. Been using for quite some time. I'm using an XT2 and also an XH1. So I enjoy small bodies and the stability of the camera and the look and feel of it.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So mostly I move around on an XH1 than I do with an XT2. So it depends on what I'm photographing.
And the XH1, obviously the first Fujifilm camera with in-body image stabilization, does that IBIS system make a difference to your photography? Do you use it particularly?
Mostly I photograph from the heart, literally from my heart, because I cycle a lot and my camera is always in my heart. So it works for me in that sense.
When you say it's in your heart, do you mean physically where you're holding it?
Yeah, where I'm holding it is in my heart, and also how I engage with people. I photograph from a standing point from an honest standing point. So I photograph from my heart.
And why is that? Is that to allow you to engage with the people more, so it's not as intrusive as when you're lifting the camera? Do you find that lifting the camera to your eye brings more of a divide between you?
A camera will always come as a weapon, and it will always intimidate people. My mentor Buyapi Mdlele from Buyapi University, I learned something from him, which was trying to develop a photography-friendly space. So where I'm from, I've tried to develop that in a sense where people are no more intimidated when I lift the camera. So it depends on where I'm photographing. I can say either a bigger body or a smaller body intimidates people, but I've built a space where I could easily pick up my camera because I try to represent people in a positive way. So they allow me to photograph them. So it does not intimidate them anymore like it used to.
I think that's a very powerful statement, that a camera can be like a weapon, especially when you lift it, and it can be a force for good, or it can be a destructive force, depending on the photographer who is using it and how they use that weapon, as it were. So it's an interesting way, and I like this idea of camera-friendly space or photography-friendly space, because you're creating, I presume, if I understand you correctly, you're creating a space where people don't feel intimidated. They feel relaxed enough that they can be themselves, and especially as a documentary photographer, which is a style of photography which I particularly lean to as well. I presume that you're wanting to capture those natural moments when they have relaxed and allowed you into that space.
Yeah, sometimes you need to become the story that you're trying to tell. You need to understand people, how they function, how they handle themselves. You need to become them. So my approach is all about understanding people. I don't shoot like a tourist. I don't take away images. I sit down and have conversation with everyone I photograph, so that they can give me an idea on how to photograph them. I might be judged on that. People may feel that my images are posed, but they're not. It's just that I want to be in a same page with the people that I photograph. I want them to, because I don't know how to represent people. I can document them, but I don't know how to represent them. But through these conversations, I can easily learn how to represent them and how also to photograph them and how comfortable they can get. I don't do portrait photography. because I don't know how to photograph people in a way that makes them happy or want to
I
be
really
seen.
like I like this idea of becoming the story, becoming part of the story, and representing the people whose stories you're telling. And I think that's something which particularly comes across in your work, that you become part of whatever it is that is going on. Because obviously, too often you see where the camera becomes a story. People are reacting to that camera instead of the camera documenting what would be happening whether you were there or not. And that's a difficult thing to do, to fade into the background, and yet still be close enough to the action that you can document what is happening.
Yeah, I always try to. I want to be seen. Something that was said by one of the greatest to ever come, Andrew Shabangu, and he said, "I want to be seen so that people know that I photographed them, instead of hiding myself and creating images of people while they don't see me." So that's why I like small bodies and short lenses. It's because I want to be seen. I want to be in this space, and I want to photograph people in that sense, as opposed to be I'm hiding behind a wall or a tree, and people are not even aware that I'm around. I want them to know that I'm around.
That's interesting, because it is something which comes up quite a lot. Is especially in this style of photography, are these candid shots, these photographs where people don't necessarily know they're having their photograph taken. I have to say, I'm with you. I can honestly say that the vast majority of people that I photograph know they're being that their photographs are being captured, because I want that interaction with the camera. Even if they're going about whatever they're doing, I feel I want to involve them in that process. But there is another school of thought, which is with the capturing candid photographs of people who are just going about their lives without knowing that you're there.
Mm.
I like the idea that you want to be seen and be part of that process, rather than, as you mentioned, hiding around the corner. Um,
Yeah,
are there any lenses? What's your lens choice when you're going out for the day and you're grabbing just one or two lenses? What are your choices for lenses?
uh, um, when I buy a lens, I spend a lot of time with it and neglect. Cool.
And we're back. Oh, hang on a second. Let me switch this over. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Let's take this down a bit. Sorry, we just had a power cut. This is one of the things that happens when you're on live streams. So apologies for that, but we are back, and thank you, Andile, for being so
Yeah,
patient.
no
So
problem. Cool.
let me do this. Okay, that's better, and we're back. Okay, so you were telling me, sorry, I just interrupted you with a power cut, but you were telling me about your lenses.
Yeah, I've been shooting on a 1.4 23 mil, and also I enjoy shooting on a f2 35.
And I love that those f2 lenses, especially that little 35 millimeter. It's a beautiful lens to pair, especially with these discrete mirrorless bodies of the X series cameras, because again it allows you to get close to the action, but without being too intrusive. So those are beautiful lenses, and that f1.4. The beautiful depth of field that you can get from that lens.
Yeah, because I enjoy a lot of shallow depth of field, so that's why I enjoy shooting on a f2 lens.
And so I think this would be a great time to bring in some of your photographs, and perhaps we could have a little chat about your process in capturing them. So let's have a quick look, and actually we've got I think we've got a series of photographs here along a similar with the similar style. Tell me a little bit about this series of photographs. Does it have a name?
So this is the third phase of a series that explores African spirituality. The project is titled God Moves. So when those young legends move into the left side of the frame, they're either going to the mountain to hunt or to swim. And when they move into the right side, they walking back home. So when I was shooting one of my projects titled Amanzi that explores African spirituality, something just said to me, look up. When I looked up, I saw this wall and I saw these legends moving in a poetic way. Then 2 days after, I went again to chill, and the light was dying, and I saw other people walking on top of the wall. Then I started just chilling around on the wall. For 2 weeks, no one came through. After 2 weeks, then I started seeing people. And with this project, I just decided to let the camera to narrate the story. It was shot on an X-T10 and on a 90 mil, because I was a bit far. Then the part of the series now was shot on a 56 because I had to be next to the wall so that I could listen to their conversation and start showing them the images when they're moving on top of the wall. The reason the sky is blue, the black part is the wall. So the slightly blue part reflects the water, because behind that wall there's water. So that's why I use the slightly blue grade on them.
And so what are they walking on? So there's a wall. So the dark part at the bottom is a wall, and then there's they're walking on the wall, or it's high ground behind that.
So they're walking on top of the wall that divides the dam. So there's a dam behind that wall, which is a division of the dam. So they're walking on top. And the crazy thing about this project is that 20 years back, I used to come and swim on the same water. Then after, when I stayed in the space, now I started photographing the entire space. So that's the great thing about documentary photography, that it allows you to revisit your childhood through visuals.
And so for you, this is definitely a coming full circle back to your own experiences, so you can empathize with the people walking along that wall, because a few years ago that was yourself.
Yeah, that was me. I had to make them silhouettes because growing up we were not allowed to go to that dam. So some of them were saying like, don't show me on Daily Sun. Some were saying, don't show me on these social media platforms, and some were like, Malume, you can show me. I don't have a problem. So the decision came around those conversations and listening to those voices, and I was like, let me just go silhouette so that I don't put them in problems with their family, or rather in trouble.
But then for me, I think the silhouette actually makes for some of these images in this series, because if we look at some of the others, I feel like I really enjoy the minimalist approach to the and feel of these photographs. It's the simplicity which almost makes the image, and so I think that perhaps the silhouette adds to that. Andile, have I lost you? Well, let's have another look at one of Andile's image, part of this series. And actually, if you're looking at these at this image here, the images are slightly different sizes. So there isn't the black wall at the side. It's the same ratio. But let me have a look at another one of these. You see this, and this one I can see is entitled "The Fisherman and His Family." And again, for me, I really enjoy these silhouette series. So I think that I understand now. I know the story behind why Andile chose to put these into silhouette. But for me, I think it almost adds to the story, because one of the things that I enjoy about Andile's photography is that it tells a story. Each of these photographs tell a story, but they don't tell the whole story. So the viewer still has to put some of those to do some of the work. Still has to put some of the story together. So although we can see here, we can see that it is a fisherman. You can see his fishing rods and his family. We don't know who they are. We don't know what exactly they're doing, and I think that adding that to the that adds to the overall story. Andile, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. Your turn.
Yeah.
So we were just discussing, and one of the things that I was just mentioning is for me, I quite enjoy that now that I know why you've put this series into silhouette. But for me, I quite enjoy that they're in silhouette, because I feel like that makes the viewer do some of the work. Because when we tell a story through a photograph, we want to tell a story, but I'm not sure that we necessarily want to tell the whole story. The viewer still has the ability to add their own parts. You know, when I look at this series, I see the two children, or this image, sorry, I see the two children, and I see one intently, and I can guess that that's his father maybe, and that he's intent on the fishing, whereas the other little boy, he's off to do his own thing with the dogs. And you know, I like that a viewer can look at that and they can make up they can interpret their own story, and somebody else will look at it in a different way. And I think that perhaps adds something to it. I think there's one more of this series, which are of these silhouette series. Now, this I'm not sure is part of the same series, or this is a different series.
This one's a different series. I just call it Umbrella Stories. So it's just an idea of following people around with umbrellas, trying to explore color, trying to understand the everyday lives of everyday people. It's just playing around. So it's vernacular photography. It's just conversations that end with a photograph.
I am 100% going to steal that. I'm writing that down. Conversations that end with a photograph. I like that. And I particularly in this photograph again, it's that, to me, the thing that strikes me is the minimalism of the photograph, but the vibrancy of that one pop of color, which really becomes such a defining focal point of the image. And I know that there's a couple of other photographs in this series, and I think it just works so nicely. Let's have a look at a couple more, and then there's a couple of points I want to pick up with you. Oh, I mean, this is somebody that generally doesn't need much of an introduction. How was it you came about to be photographing Kingsley? What was
So on my best day, I'm a commercial photographer. So I photograph still for TV ads and do a bit of BTS for short films. So we're shooting the new Land Rover Defender. So I was luckily called in to shoot stills for the TV ad.
And what a beautiful portrait this is. I mean, it obviously it helps that you've got an incredibly photogenic subject, but I think it's wonderfully expressive. But one of the things that I'm interested to ask you about this image is the use of the almost negative space above. A temptation might be to crop this image in much tighter and be much more focused on the subject, or in fact in camera move much closer to the subject to have him fill in more of the frame. Whereas this really works for me as it is. But what was the thought process behind that space above?
I've studied, not even studied. I've followed the greatest. Babu Andrew Shabangu, one of the greatest by far, he once said he decided to break the rules and shoot to the sun, or photograph to the sun. So with this idea or portrait, I was trying to pull an Andrew Shabangu and shoot direct to the sun. So the idea was just to play around the light that comes from the sun.
For me, I particularly like the backlit nature of this shot, and of course, it places him. The composition of them does place him in out in the wilderness, out in somewhere which I would suggest would be something of his comfort zone, and so I think it nicely puts him into context, into the natural surroundings which he was in. If you'd moved in much closer, then it would have been a beautiful portrait, of course, but we wouldn't necessarily have placed him where he was. And to me, that's part of the story as well.
I still try to understand, or I'm still learning on what makes a great portrait or an amazing portrait.
But aren't we all doing that? Isn't that something which I think we all strive for, is to constantly learn? I feel that once we, the moment we think that the moment that as photographers we think that we know how to do everything, is exactly the moment when photography will bite us back. I think it's that constant learning which is what makes the journey so interesting. You've used this word "play around," this phrase "play around" quite a few times, and it's something I maybe want to pick up. That you seem to enjoy experimenting in your work. You play around with new ideas or new technique. How would you describe your approach to photography? Is this experimenting nature part of your approach?
I'm not an heavy duty concept type of guy. I can't shoot concepts, so I just wake up and listen to music, and I'll take one word or a line from a song. Then I'll walk outside and try to find stuff I got from that line from the song. I was watching one of documentaries Gabawa Usantu Mufu Gang, and he was explaining one of his projects, Chasing Shadows, and was speaking about Siriti, which is a shadow. And since I've been in the Josie CBDs, I've been seeing a lot of shadows. Then I took that from what he said about a shadow. And he was not speaking about it in African context, but in this case, I'm photographing it via African context, where I chase these shadows of the everyday people and trying to understand where are they going, where do they stay, why are they trying to hustle opportunities in this space. So it's me playing around those ideas. And 2 weeks after, I'm not photographing those shadows anymore. Now I'm photographing light in the night. So it's just playing around until I find a substantial body of work. Uba Obuya Kimdlele taught me that keep photographing, and you would find what you're looking for when you keep keeping on.
Yeah. So you almost come up with the concept beforehand, or you get this idea in your head, and then you go out and try and interpret it. So you might hear a song lyric, or you might see a piece of art or something, and then you want to go out and you've got that notion in your head, and you want to try and interpret it in your way.
The most amazing thing about Black people is that we relate a lot, and our stories are more of the same. How I grew up, the next person grew up in the same way. So it's easy for me to explore how they grew up through how I grew up. So sometimes images happen. I would photograph, let's say 10 shots, and put it on my archive. In the next coming 2 years or a year, when I check them, they're actually in sync with images I just created yesterday. So that's something I've been finding in my style of creating, that an image I took 2010 might make sense to the image I took 2021. So that's how I play around these images. But I have personal bodies of work where I focus on a particular topic, and I go hard on it, and I become the topic.
I'm getting this sense in our discussion. I'm getting the sense of how much of yourself is in that work. So even when you're telling somebody else's story, it's almost that you're telling your story through them, as it were. That there's a relationship between your experiences and their experiences, and how you're capturing that on in the photographs that you make.
Yeah, photography helped me to understand myself. It helped me to understand South Africa, and I've learned a lot from the everyday Bantu that I photograph through conversations. I've got advices from people. I've got shouted by people that I try to steal an image from them, and they bring me closer, and they sit me down, and they engage me, and they want to know where I'm taking these images. Why am I photographing them? Am I selling them? Or am I telling their story? So I always try to become the story. I'm not consumed by my work. There's Andile Bhala, which is Andile Bhala, and there's an Andile Bhala, which is a documentary photographer. So I try not to go deep into certain things, so that I don't become consumed by my work or what I'm trying to communicate.
And there is that danger. There is that danger of becoming consumed by the work, and almost where you become so consumed that you lose sight of what the overall objective is with the very work that you're trying to do. Sometimes people can get too close to that work, and then miss the story that's around them.
Yeah, I'm just a guy with a red backpack bike and a hat who is trying to find a voice. I'm not here to tell people stories in a way that benefits me. I'm here to start conversations with people and try to tell those stories through conversations. The saddest thing about where I'm from is that people that have amazing opinions that can change how South Africa works decides to keep quiet. And people like me are learning every day from people that have a voice but decide to keep quiet.
You've mentioned that photography has helped you to understand something of South Africa and something of the stories. I'm interested, especially as a documentary photographer, as you are. What place do you think that photography has in society, especially in South Africa? Has photography got a place, and what's your place within it?
Yeah, these are real stories with real layers. These are people's lives, and we're trying to communicate something in a most respectful and proper way. We're trying not to demean people or degrade people. We're just trying to make conversations that might change how things are done in the country. So photography is important in starting those type of conversations. And the other question is, where do I find myself? I happen to be in a space where I'm just a guy with a camera that was trying to learn from people that I meet. Some situations I've never experienced. I experienced them through photographing people, and I start to understand how they live, how they function, as opposed to, I don't photograph my experiences. I photograph stuff that I'm scared of. I'm scared of moving. I'm paranoid in the Joburg CBDs, but I'm photographing the Joburg CBDs at night because I'm trying to understand my fear, why I'm scared, who's making me feel scared, and why are they making me feel scared. So
that's a powerful concept to photograph what you're scared of, because by understanding what we're scared of, you hope that you cease to be scared anymore, to be afraid. So it's like when we're children and we see monsters in the shadows. If we shine light onto the shadows, then we see there's no monsters there. And if we can, and as a society or as adults within that society, if we can shine light onto the things that we're afraid of, and these photographs help us shine light onto the things that we are afraid of, it's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, opening ourselves to people's stories allows us to connect with those people and allows us to help those people or also be helped by those people. We grow up being told not to talk to strangers, but we photograph strangers, and strangers have amazing stories that change other people's lives. So it's a bit tricky.
Now that's interesting, because actually I would say that 99% of the people that I photograph are complete strangers, people that I have met just moments, sometimes seconds before. And you're absolutely right. We all grow up not talking to strangers, and yet I've made a huge part of my work speaking and photographing strangers. So there's an interesting juxtaposition in that. It's something that I haven't particularly thought of before. Let's have a look. We're talking about the how you present people. Let's have a look at some photographs of how you present people. Again, there's a series of photographs along these lines, which I've really enjoyed. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about what goes in your process to capturing a portrait like this.
This is a portrait of Futu, me. one of the most amazing faces I've ever came across, and Nohumoto. So this image is part of a project titled One Sugar, No Milk. So it's a coffee series. It's a body of work that explores South African coffee culture, not in the modern approach, but in Black families. The reason I call it One Sugar, No Milk is because it explores how we suffer in Black families, where month end everyone would drink coffee and milk and sugar, but around the 15th or the 20th, there's no enough sugar or coffee or milk. Milk and sugar is only for older people, and as kids, we only drink black coffee. So it explores that. That's why it's titled One Sugar, No Milk. It explores love in Black families.
I find that fascinating, and there's a lot you mentioned before about the layers, peeling away the layers of society, peeling away the layers of the stories, and there's a lot of layers in the work that you do. And I think sometimes when we see an image like this, adding the story behind it and the context brings this image to life. Let's have a look at one of my favorite photographs that you've captured in a series of photographs. This, I think, is one of the first photographs that really brought your work that I really noticed when I came across your work originally. Tell me about this.
Umnqobi is a cross collaboration between Lindo Zwane, Andile Bhala, and a Sizwe Khoza, where we use boxing as a communication in terms of boxing all the problems or punching your problems away. It explores the resilience and just playing around the idea of being men and trying to play our part in communities in defending women.
So again, there's a whole other layer to what you're trying to communicate with this work. I particularly one of the things that I really enjoy about this is the color tones and the subtle, especially the subtle color tones, and how the warmth of the overall image with the background, and then the vibrancy of the red gloves, but not so vibrant. So there's subdued tones, but they're powerful tones. How much does your thought process goes into how you're going to present it, as far as the color tones and your post-production when you're actually taking the photograph? Is that something you're already thinking how you want it to appear, or is it that once you've captured it, then you decide how to finalize the image?
I might have a storyboard of how I want to photograph stuff through research, because I research a lot of photographers, your police, Afana, your Liolos, people that are killing it in the game, who are telling amazing stories. So I'd sit down and study how they create. But when it comes to how I grade my work, I try to shoot what I call final edit. So already on camera, I know what I want. But when I get into my study next to my computer, it happens. It depends who's in the house. If I'm alone, there's a certain style I put out there, or certain grading. If my lady is around, there's a certain style of grading that comes from her always coming into the room, or me having this crazy grading. Then I would move from my study to a TV room just to mess with her and go back. So it depends. It's either if I'm having coffee or drinking a beer or just water, it happens. So one of my greatest projects and works, they just happened. I think it's God's eye. So I don't know. It just happened.
I find that fascinating that the final image can be affected by whether or not you're drinking a coffee at the time, or you're drinking a beer, or or you've got friends over or whatever. That affects your mood at the time when you're processing the photographs, and that can affect the final outcome. I think it is a beautiful comment and a beautiful photograph, and lots of comments coming in. Peter, a wonderful photographer, part of the Fujifilm ex-photographer team here in South Africa, and rightly so. And we have others sharing their love of this photograph, because it is beautiful work. Let's have a look at one last photograph before we just. There's a couple of points that I want to pick up with you just before we go. But this photograph is I think one of my favourite photographs that I've observed, and I think it's a powerful photograph visually. But I'm interested in your thoughts behind it.
So I normally photograph kids that swim around the dam, and there's always problems and respect around children's laws. So I try to respect that. I don't show kids' faces. I try to show them with their parents, or ask for permission to either photograph them. So I was photographing these young legends playing around, and I'd see hands on top of the water when they underwater. And when I photographed this, I was so excited. And when I posted it on Instagram, a friend of mine, Nusana, said to me, "Shucks, that looks like Gordon Sparks." And I had to go to the internet and check this legend. And the crazy thing was, the grading was the same. The image technique was the same. Even though he shot it on a landscape, I shot it on a portrait mode. But I like, wow, there's always images that come in people's lives. So it's quite important to research before creating or putting work out there. So none of those images that happen while these young legends were having fun, swimming and stuff.
But again, it's just being on hand, capturing the moment. And I particularly like again the simplicity of the image, but comes with a powerful image as well. It creates a powerful image as well. So we've chatted a lot about your process and your thought process behind your images, but that's things that have happened in the past. I'm interested in what excites you for the future. What does the immediate future hold for Andile Bhala? I know you've been working on some books recently, and you've had a book out. You've had a book out recently, which I know has been very, very well received. How was that process of putting a book together? How did you find that process?
When I started photography, the idea was not to have an exhibition, but was to drop a Soweto photo book, and it took me time, because the first mistake I did was creating work while I was not aware what I wanted to do, and so I created an A3 photo book titled "God Moves 2020." And people are receiving it in a good way. It's one of my favorite projects by far, because those silhouettes are being narrated by the text. Sometimes text might manipulate the image, but I try so much to write what the people that were moving on top of the wall were saying, so that the image on its own does not lose touch from the people I photographed. So I'm gonna drop my second phase in June. which is going to be 50 copies of A5 for the actual book titled God Moves. And end of the month on the 30th, I'll be showcasing the look and feel of these silhouettes and how they look and feel on print. So people should come through at August House. I'll be showing the part of the series.
And people can find you, of course, online and at your website and social media. And if you haven't already checked out Andile's work, I very much recommend that you do that and give him a follow, because I'm really excited to see what the future holds and what your next series are going to be. Because one of the things I enjoy is that the stories, I feel like as you're communicating the stories, this is something which we can engage in and we can follow. And so I'm really interested to see what will be coming next from Andile.
We always try to find meaning on what we're doing for a living. So I think my best work is in the future.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a perfect way to end our discussion. And it's been an absolute pleasure to chat photography with you, and especially to understand something of your thought process behind your work.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for everybody that's joined us over the past 6 weeks, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful experience. Now watch out, later in the year, we will be coming back for a new series of live streams with Fujifilm South Africa. But for now, thank you. And remember to keep checking out the Fujifilm South Africa social media pages for even more stories and images to come. Thank you.